Hey guys, so today I'm going to be showing you how I built a multi-platform app using the Flutter framework. So this application actually runs on iOS, Android, and the web, which is super cool. Flutter is a really rad framework. This was actually the first time that I have used it. So first, I'll explain what this app actually is, what it does, how I decided to make this demo, and I'll actually start with the prototyping phase and how I decided what features to build, how I did the mockups, how I did some user walkthroughs, and then finally the implementation of actually how I turn this into a Flutter app and how Flutter works, and a little bit about some of the interactions that I built here. Let's start with what this app actually does. Basically, this is a digital guidebook for rock climbing. And if you aren't familiar, basically wherever there's mountains, some person at some point has decided to climb up the cliffs in those mountains. And people who like to do that need a place to publish where the good routes are. A rock climbing route could be a single pitch route, it could be a multi-pitch route. I won't get into too many details about this. This is all sort of auxiliary information. But anyway, all of these icons on the map represent rock climbing routes. And traditionally, rock climbing routes have been published in physical guidebooks that people buy in stores, and they look through them in their house and they carry them around to different crags. Sometimes these guidebooks are really big and heavy. They're like the size of a small phone book. So people don't enjoy bringing them around. And there's been a few attempts at making a good digital guidebook. Probably the most notable version is called Mountain Project. It's really, really popular. But I personally think there's a few, UI, UX decisions within Mountain Project that I would like to change. The goal of this project was to make a really, really fluid user experience for a digital rock climbing guidebook. I'll start out with a little demo. As you can see, I've been zooming in and out, and you've been seeing these different markers. These represent different types of rock climbing. So we can click on one to see, and we've got, okay, so this is Assafail. And Assafail is known as a crag. It is a single pitch, so we can see some information down here. It's a single pitch crag, primarily composed of sport routes. There's 140 individual routes at this crag, and the hike takes about 45 minutes to get there. So we can click on Assafail and we can see that it's composed of these two sub areas. This is actually filler information. We can take a deeper look and we can go into the lower wall, and then we can see some additional routes that are in the lower wall. We can see the Last Dance. This route is 26 meters. The difficulty is 513A, and there is 18 bolts. And here's some comments that people can leave. There's a simple description. This is just a single pitch route, so it's going to be pretty simple. But we can actually go to a bigger crag. This is called Echo Canyon. It's near the town of Canmore. You can see that there's all these different areas. So people get confused. They're like, which one of these do I really want to go to? So I've included the average grades of each of these areas, and people can get an idea of how many routes are in the area that they're thinking about going to. But then they're like, okay, I'm like a hardman rock climber and I want to go to the Coliseum, and the average grade there is 514, but I'm like, where is the Coliseum? So luckily, there's this map icon that you can click, and it automatically brings you to Echo Canyon. You can zoom in here, and we can see that this is sort of like the layout of the crag. You can click on these different areas and find, oh, here's the Coliseum right here, and here's a couple of routes in the Coliseum. Or maybe you are thinking you actually want to do some multi-pitch climbing, so you look over here at the tall story wall because one of your friends told you that there's some really good routes on the tall story wall, like Marriage Box. This is actually my photo in the background here. And here is a really extensive description because this is a multi-pitch route. You can see that there's 4 pitches. It has the grade and the length of each pitch, as well as a description. And there is a descent description as well, and of course comments. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit about the prototyping process that I went through for this application. So basically, I started by thinking about what tasks I wanted to perform in this application. And then I would create these UI mockups inside of Figma, and then I would show those mockups to a small group of test users, and that would help me discover any bugs with the usability of the application. And then I could just go back and I could refine the design and then retest with users, and I repeated that process once or twice, and then finally that led me to actually implementing the design that you see right now in Flutter. Now, how do you decide which features to build in an application? Well, you should always take a task-centered approach. And so for me, because this is a digital climbing guidebook, I had to just focus on the most important things. And you'll see in my original Figma mockup, I had actually designed a lot more features than what I as a single person had the ability to implement in this time span. So for the actual implementation of the project, I decided to focus on these 4 core things: just finding areas, finding routes, finding information about the routes, beta, and filtering out the irrelevant climbing routes. So all of these tasks are actually just for the early stages of the digital guidebook. All right, so let's jump into Figma and I'll show you guys how I did the prototyping process. I spent a lot of time in here just playing around with different ideas. What I really like about Figma is that you can design these interactions, so it's really simple and fast to do this. So you don't just have to wireframe everything. You can actually make things look pretty good, but then you can also add the interactions that you're thinking about adding. We can click on a crag here. We can see this is Asafail. I actually got feedback during my walkthroughs that these buttons were not immediately clear. Usually when a user clicks on a crag, they said the first thing that they're concerned about is the routes that are there. You actually want to minimize the amount of tapping that users have to do. So here you have the filter button for the routes at a particular area. So you could say sort by, number of ratings, number of sprays, or order ascending, descending. You can say sport trad, filter by grades, filter by number of pitches, and then go. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I used Flutter to build this application, and Flutter is really cool because it allows you to build multi-platform pretty easily. There's a bit of a learning curve because this language is a little bit different, probably necessarily so, considering it compiles to x86 and ARM. It's honestly really impressive that they were able to make it work so well. I was actually really surprised. But anyway, so here's my app entry point, but what we're really concerned with is this homeview.dart file here, which is this is the main Google Maps view that you would see, where basically I'm using the Google Maps API. You can see I'm importing that package right here. And so in Flutter, everything is a widget. And so you can see here, this is actually a stateful widget as opposed to a stateless widget, which you use quite a bit normally. Now, why is it stateful? Because it has a state. The map can be redrawn and moved around and etc. So because one of the most important feature of this application was actually displaying the markers, which was quite a bit more difficult to get to work than I had originally thought it would be. But anyway, the first thing you have to do is initialize this empty set, initialize your other variables. So these are actually my variables for the filtering screen. Then you can also set up your camera, location, and position. I like to break up my project in terms of main views here, which these are all different pages, and then also in sort of sub widget views, where you can see that this is my code for the bottom sheet that just pops up when you tap an icon. All right, now I'll show you how to run this in Flutter. You can see down here I have the device, which I have selected. I was developing on my iPhone earlier, but I want to show you the Chrome version as well. So you just select Chrome as your device, go to your application entry point, and you can just go ahead and run that. And you can see that it'll spin this up in a local host. So now I'm just using my mouse with my scroll wheel to navigate. You can see that this is all of the generated data that I showed you earlier in the project. Now what we're really considered with is just these 4 down here. So you can see here's a multi-pitch crag called Yamnuska. You can see that same information that we saw earlier. Go to the suicide wall, see what Lord of the Rings is all about. Now, during my heuristic evaluations, I used the criteria from Nielsen and Mullich. So when I was doing these user walkthroughs, I was asking users to really think about these criteria and then give me feedback to see if they thought I met the criteria. So in the end, all the users actually agreed. They gave feedback on these criteria and said that the app definitely met them. However, I still wouldn't say that this system is actually ready for use, because while they said that it met the actual interactions and the UI UX itself met these criteria, they said that there was definitely some features that they would want to see in a climbing app that I hadn't included. For example, the ability to save routes to your phone and the ability to see really detailed topographies of climbing routes and the locations that they're in. Those are definitely some features that I would need to add for this to actually be a usable system. Of course, I would also need to do things like, build out a proper backend with a relational database. So is this system actually ready for use? No, but I think the general idea as a proof of concept works. I have shown that the way that I've gone about this as far as a UI UX perspective is good, and I think I could definitely continue along this route. So that concludes this project. Maybe I'll make another video to explain more in depth about how I actually did some of this stuff with Flutter, but for now, this is just a focus on the usability aspects. But yeah, let me know what you guys think.